Welcome back to another episode of Ladies Kicking Ass. Today is going to be a wonderful, I just know, empowering podcast. I'm so privileged to be able to have Kristie on our show with us today. I am so thankful that she decided to come on, share her story and everything that she does. She is a life coach. She is a mama of three littles from 12 to 4, including some twins in there. So she's got all the things going on the same time that we do, and the craziness of summertime and just navigating being an entrepreneur and a mama at the same time. So Kristie, thank you so much for being on the show. And why don't you go ahead and share your personal journey with us, kind of how you got into life coaching and what inspired you to start SoulVibes Life Coaching online so that you can help other women.
Absolutely, Tanya. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm honored. And I want to share this is my first podcast. So I'm super excited to be here. Thank you. And as far as what brought me to the path of life coaching and hypnotherapy, I think, and this is might be minimizing it a little bit in life, we all go through ups and downs. And depending where we are in our healing journey and our mindset and that perspective we have on life, we're going to experience those ups and downs differently. But one thing that in my process and my journey that I learned was that not so differently that we're alone in this, that there is just so much support when we come together, whether it's literally or figuratively holding one another's hands. And I knew that throughout this process and, these struggles and these varying degrees of trauma that I went through, that I wanted to be able to help others. And so through this experience, I was led to coaching. My heart found it. I found some friends and some mentors that guided me to this path, and I created Soul Vibes. Little small detail here as far as why I named my company Soul Vibes, because I get that question from time to time.
Yeah.
For me, when I thought about, what is it, that I want to achieve? What do I want to manifest? And I was like, I want to manifest and call in those soulful connections with individuals who are looking to have those heartfelt and deep conversations. And to me, a soul vibe, we've all had them before when we're with somebody and we just click, right? You've probably had that feeling where you're just vibing, the energy is flowing, and we're having those perspective shifts, and the space for transformation opens up, and we kind of walk away on that high, and we're thinking, man, I feel good. I feel encouraged. I feel supported, seen, and heard. And so it became my calling card for people that I wanted to call into my life that were looking for this. And so with that, I get to do the work as this transformational mindset coach and hypnotherapist, and operate off of the fundamental belief that we're all born whole and complete, and that there's nothing lacking within us.
That is beautiful.
Thank you. And I think, I kind of stopped there, but to talk a little bit about, mindset and how it plays the role and why what I do helps individuals, is that when we're looking at our lives, mindset is that thing, for those that don't know, that we have been building from a very, very early age in our life. So that view of ourselves, the world, the people around us, and our experiences. And we've been shaping that for a long time. And it's created, all the limiting beliefs, the fears, even the good messages we tell ourselves. And so by meeting clients where they are on their journey, I kind of say, hey, we're going to take a little detour here, and it's going to be a good one. We always talk about stopping and smelling the roses and self-care. Well, coaching can be that for individuals. That's that moment to pause and take some time for self-care and stop and smell the roses. And my version of that is taking you on a scenic route and allowing you to look out at the landscape of your mindset and see where, you have that growth mindset and the environment's lush and beautiful, and where it's more barren and maybe a little bit more fixed, and even the areas where there's some shadows or some areas you haven't explored. And we safely explore those by looking at some of the stories and the language and how you show up for yourself, and whether or not it's empowering or disempowering. And then, hypnotherapy comes in by allowing me to work within the subconscious with the individuals who are interested, and release blocks and work on the patterns of whether it be negative thinking or habits, because that subconscious is that data bank for all things that memories and habits and the things that we've stored deep down within. And so it's just a beautiful place and space that I'm blessed to work in. And it's allowed for me to not only work one-on-one with clients, but do speaking engagements and various workshops.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I have so many questions about everything that you just said there. So great introduction. This is going to be a good one. So
Thank you.
I am very interested too because I know a little bit about your backstory. You are a trauma survivor yourself. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that
Yes.
backstory that kind of got you into all of this? I very much resonate with you in this area too. And so I know this can be a really raw topic for even the listeners or even for you to be able to talk about. So, just the graciousness of
Mm.
those things, it makes me super emotional because trauma is something that I think it's not like, oh, maybe somebody's been through some trauma. I truly believe that everybody's got trauma things that have occurred to them at some point. The different levels of what that is to somebody is very subjective, or I think, because someone may have grown up with like a mom that screamed at them all of the time, and that's very traumatic for them. And some people may have been, sexual assault victims, and that is a different level of variation of trauma. And I think in today's world, it's almost like, let's compare these two. Well, my trauma is way worse than your trauma. There's like trauma measurements with this. So I'd love to
Right.
hear your backstory of things. And then just kind of like, if you work specifically with people that do have trauma, like what does that look like for them? Because I know that can be it has been for me a very lifelong journey to work through some of those
Yeah.
things.
Absolutely. And I honor that, and I feel the emotion that you do as well, because it is a lifelong journey of healing. And there healing isn't a set destination. I truly believe we're here to do that work on earth. And as you explain those varying degrees of trauma, each and every one of us experiences, it differently at different stages of our life. And it's not always
Mhm.
one singular event. And in fact, in my life, there was several, unfortunately for me, and I'm sure as in plenty of others' lives. So
Mhm.
really, I think the message at first I want to make sure I get across, and I'm going to just reiterate this again, is that, we're not alone in this experience, and that we can come together. We don't need to be in that space where, mine is worse than yours, because something just so powerful happens when you come together with individuals in this courageous and brave place of vulnerability, right? And when
Yeah.
you come in this space, the shame, and I think, you might have said this earlier when we spoke before about bringing it into the light. And then when we bring it into
Mhm.
the light, it loses that darkness, the shame, the guilt that's overcasting it. And so part of my experience is, first, I want to share that as a human being. And when I talk about healing and transforming, this is something I'm continually doing. Often the things that I offer and I share with my clients are things that I too am working on, because I am human. I'm not perfect. I don't tell you how to live your life or what the answers are, because that's for us to discover for ourselves and learn
Mhm.
about ourselves. And so my trauma, I was an individual who, in my mindset, what was fixed in my mindset, where I was, having my own obstacles and struggles, was that I was fear minded. I didn't have a good sense of self worth. I didn't have strong boundaries. I couldn't speak to them. And I especially struggled when it came to speaking my truth and trusting myself. And this message throughout, adolescence, childhood, adolescence, really built up. And where it was very, very apparent was on my 22nd birthday, I was taken and sexually assaulted. And this experience, as it happened to me, it was, first off, so unreal. It was just unreal. And the first thing I remember thinking was, this had to have been my fault. And if I say it wasn't, if I speak my truth, no one's going to believe me anyways, because that was somewhere along the line a message I had received in my younger years. And it, just
Mhm.
so heartbreaking, Tanya. I look back at that and I think, wow. And I hug that 22-year-old version of me and that younger version of me. And I say, you know what? I got you now. I believe
Yeah.
you now. And a lot of it is going back and telling that version of ourselves that I got you and I will protect you. And so at that
Mm-hmm.
time that I experienced this, um, I went through these doubts, and then the court proceedings were just horrendous, right? And I remember sitting at Starbucks, and I was about to get the verdict. And Bob Marley, Three Little Birds song. It's a great song, but at the time, it did not feel like such a great song because I just knew it wasn't going to end well for me, and it didn't. The perpetrator was, released, and I just remember that feeling of nobody believed me, and
Yeah.
it was very, very hard. And I had to tether myself. There was this voice that came into my head, coupled with this song, the song that was telling me everything was going to be all right, that I realized that, justice isn't always just. And for me and my faith and what I believe in, I was able to grab that like a lifeline and understand that somehow, somewhere, that my higher power was aware of what really happened, that was enough for me, and that my truth and what I believed was enough, and that if I stood in front of thousands of people and spoke my truth and they didn't believe me, it didn't matter. So that was a pivotal moment
Mm-hmm.
for me where I began to shift that story in my mind that, what I said didn't matter and nobody would believe me. And I started asking myself, how can I start learning to trust myself? How can I start learning to believe myself? And that's one big part of this process that we go through with healing, is these life altering questions. So if you're in this
Yeah.
space where you're asking myself, what's my purpose? What did I go through this for? And how do I find joy? How do I heal? You're in a really, really powerful place. That is your soul, your spirit speaking to you. And so beyond that, I talk about having multiple traumatic events. I had thankfully gone to therapy, and at that time I had still been shoving some things down. I think that's kind of normal of us as humans, especially when we're, working on trusting ourselves and speaking our truth. And then I had our first son, Kingston. He's 12. And I went through postpartum depression and anxiety. And if I thought rock bottom was the sexual assault, that was like the rock bottom of rock bottom for me. Anybody who has been depressed, you can be very isolated, feel very lonely. And the one thing I will say that this gave me, because I'm a fighter, because I'm, this person who's like in survival, well, not anymore, thank goodness, but was in survival mode, was I just shook and released everything away from me. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I was fighting for me at this point, and I shook and I broke free from anything that didn't serve me. And unfortunately, there was some impulse in these actions, but that's what that experience gave me. And again, that experience to reach out, to get help, and to begin to build my support system. And while I'm an incredibly extroverted person, the truth to that is that my circle is small because I believe in, quality over quantity, and one safe person is better than 10 okay people. So,
Yes.
right. And so, I dedicated at that point, I was coming close to my 30s. And a lot of us talk about, okay, 30s, when you really start, something happens. I don't know if it's for men as well, but for women, we really start coming to our own. And that's exactly what that was for me. I
Mm-hmm.
had been working on my healing for some time and really building the strong friendships and family relationships that I have now. And I dedicated my 30s to rediscovering myself and making it about accepting me, every single part of me, the good, the bad, the beautiful, the quirky, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it was just amazing, because then I had to face the IVF journey. And anybody who has been through IVF knows that it's such a roller coaster of emotions. It's such a mashup of, the financial burden, the time constraints for, having to give yourself the shots and all the medication you need to take and everything you need to remember, as well as, the role it plays in your marriage. And are you guys on the same
Mm-hmm.
page? And, we had been on that journey for 5 years and hadn't gotten pregnant yet. And then we moved into IVF. And the reason I share this is because this is the last, big pivotal moment in my life that kind of summed everything up and showed me where I wanted to be and who I was going to be in my life. And in this process, we had our first failed round of IVF, and I remember just thinking, that I went into survivor mode again, right? And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, no, I'm not doing anymore. I have to protect myself. And I remember crying to the doctor and being like, absolutely not. I'm not doing a second round. I need to protect me. I don't think I can handle this. I was just so heartbroken. And,
Mm-hmm.
thank goodness for him for gently encouraging me and guiding me to do the second round, because we did end up pregnant with our amazing twins. Now, where everything really comes into play, where I really got to see the fruits of my labor, was during this time. I really had discovered my love for meditation. And I don't want to, be here and push meditation or push it over medication or anything like that. But for me in my journey, it was such a transformational point in my life, because I was at a place where I wasn't necessarily feeling safe in my own mind. And what
Mm-hmm.
that allowed me to do is it allowed me to go within and create this haven. And, I encourage everybody to be able to go within and find that love and that haven within themselves, that home. And
Yeah.
in this space, it really transformed the way I think, or the way I thought, and the way I showed up in the world. There was definitely a lot more light, a lot more positivity, a lot more releasing the old stories and just writing the new ones. And so
Mm-hmm.
when I went in to deliver the twins, because I'm that girl who labors at home as long as possible, I I get in there, and my husband and I are in triage, and the nurse is like, "You're having these babies now." And anybody who's had multiples knows this is a big production, like 5 people wheeling you over to the OR. And it's normal to have your twins or your multiples in the OR. And there's like 20 some people in there, and you're there with your goods all out over the place, and everybody's watching.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, for the most part, that's what all of us go through birth, right? And I was fortunate enough to have baby A, so Decker, completely unmedicated, all natural, and I utilized my meditation and my hypnobirthing. And I'm not certified in hypnobirthing, and I definitely recommend getting somebody who is, because I was self-taught. But it was just such a beautiful, beautiful experience. And then, shit hit the fan, because after he
Mm-hmm.
was born, baby B went transverse, which is, sideways, and he was stuck. We had to do an emergency C-section. I'm pretty go with the flow. I had done my research. I knew I would do whatever it takes to get my babies in the world safely. I knew pretty quickly during the C-section that something was off. There were some details that I'll spare sharing just because they're a little gory, but that I just knew,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
I remember I started to kind of fade in and out, and I was holding on so tight, trying to just hear him cry. I just wanted to hear him cry. And so eventually I think I hear him cry, and I think, my husband, if I remember correctly, came over and, gave me a kiss on my head. And then typically what they do is they take baby and dad to the nursery.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, they called a code crimson, and that's when a woman, hemorrhages. And so, due to the nature of the C-section, I had lost over half of my blood volume. And at this time, and I'll probably get emotional sharing this story, because this was just such a like whoa moment. I remember just kind of fading and thinking, okay, they're here, they're safe, I can let go now. And as I start to just let go, so peaceful, so calm, I remember, wait, what? Like, no, don't let go. And I remember just calling out to God and saying, God, please bring me back to my boys. And I hear this voice, and this voice tells me, you need to speak and you need to breathe. And so I'm like, okay, Kristie, you're a survivor. You're a fighter. Everything you've been through is for this moment. And so I started breathing, and I remember everything it took to open my eyes. And I looked up at the anesthesiologist, and I was
Mm-hmm.
able to tell him that I was, having chest pain, and his eyes opened so wide, like he had seen a ghost. And he was just like, sweetie, I don't know how you're doing this, but I need you to stay here. And I did.
Wow.
I stayed there, and, I made it, and thank goodness for that. And I really am so grateful, because I do believe it was, my ability to keep calm, my ability to be present and to feel safe within my body and regulate that kept me here. So um, really summed up the experience. That everything, it was kind of that moment where I was like, okay, I'm here for a reason. Now, what am I going to do with it?
Right. Absolutely. Wow. That's emotional just hearing that story of things because man, that's a scary I had an emergency C-section and that is a scary situation. So if you're a woman that has been through that, that takes you right back into all of the feels of that because that is very scary.
Yeah, it
Very, very
absolutely
scary.
is.
Especially when you say, I just wanted to hear them cry. I remember thinking that too, like I'll be fine as soon as I hear a cry, because that's your big goal with that baby is to hear, they're here, they're
Right.
safe, they're good. So that is an incredible story of your strength too, Steve. Thank you so much for sharing that because
Thank
that's
you.
tough. That is really tough. Um, and I think that's just kind of, this is a beautiful story and illustration of that sometimes when the shit is happening to us and we have to be really strong to get through things, even when you get through that specific thing that you think you're being strong for, sometimes it doesn't make any sense whatsoever what the hell that was for in the first place. And then
Absolutely.
years will pass and you're like, that's why that happened to me.
Absolutely. And, sorry to interrupt, but
No, go ahead.
with that being said, that's kind of why I got out of the habit of asking myself why, because I realized that the
Mhm.
question of why, like, why did that happen to me? Why isn't this working out? It's just like this cyclical, like repeat, wash, rinse, keep going. And it puts you in that role instead of being the author in your life. And I started asking myself, how and what can I do? Because it created that action in my life. And it's just so funny that you say that, because that's exactly where I was at that point, was like, okay, this is why this all makes sense. And honestly, some things just don't make sense because some people that do things are just so awful. You don't have the mindset to
Yeah,
comprehend where they're at or what they're thinking, so we can't. Or sometimes things are just so horrible you can't even answer why. So
sure. I think
how?
there is a beautiful, I know I'm a huge Tony Robbins fan. Everybody that listens to podcasts already knows this. But he so often in every one of his trainings, he takes so much time to talk about how life is happening for us, not to
Yes.
us. And even when it is that super shitty stuff that's happening, somewhere, either that's from the resilience of you getting through that, the education you gain by it, the people that you meet during it,
Mhm.
somewhere it tends to loop back around into your life that you can use that experience either to help you in something else or to help others. So, my question for you, with that being said, is how do you use these experiences that you've had to help the people that you coach?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for me, I talk a lot about mindset. For me, it was really just understanding that the power of what we think, of what we say, and how we show up for ourselves. If we don't make changes in any of those spaces, then it's very hard to transform our lives. And so, change your mind, change your life, right? I think somebody out there has
Mhm.
said that.
Yeah.
It wasn't me who came up with that. But when I speak with my clients, being able to see what stories they have on repeat and where they are playing the role and not being that author. So our
Mhm.
words and what we think are basically a pen to the paper of our lives. So how do we
Mhm.
decide then to take that and become the author and end those long chapters that are way overdue and begin to take that authority? And we do that sometimes by having to shake our life up. Sometimes it means doing the opposite of what our mind tells us to do, simply because, our mind is built to protect us. It's built to, sniff out fear. And oftentimes that fear that we perceive externally, or those stories or those perceptions we think people have, where we think, oh, they think I'm dumb or they think I'm awkward, they're actually the barriers or the cage that we have internally. The bullies are internal and we go so unchecked in our mind. I help my clients by bringing them into a safe space and beginning to layer by layer, pull that back and look at what that looks like for them and how they can begin to think in more empowering ways and speak and show up for themselves. And we do this, with tools. We do this sometimes by just simply just talking and connecting and finding the patterns in their lives that are creating these obstacles, and finding the life altering questions that help them
Mhm.
move through and beyond it. So, what is your purpose? What are your values? Do you know what those values are? And that was a big part of my process, was for myself, and why I feel I'm so fit to help, clients who are trying to transform their mindset, is because I had to become aware of where my thoughts were disempowering me, and where I wanted to believe that I was confident, but I wasn't showing up with confidence or with self-worth or loving myself and living from that space of wholeness. So
Yeah.
I work with my clients in understanding, what does it mean to live from your wholeness? What does that look like? And really just putting action behind it, because that's what us coaches do, right? We're all about having that action, finding that momentum, and what that looks like for you.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I think too, with the audience of my podcast, for sure, a lot of them are in the service industry. A lot of them are entrepreneurs. Most of them are
Mhm.
moms. So there is kind of the background of like who the listeners are for this. I think a lot of times too, when you talk about wholeness and being able to come into yourself, um, many times when you are an entrepreneur and you have this business, you end up measuring the level of your worthiness and you as a success. I'm air quoting if you're just listening
Yeah.
to this, um, as the basis of how successful your business is. And I bring this up because I get this feedback a lot from our community is like, I want to be the best mom in the world and I want to run my business really great. I want to show up great in both places. But I know even for me specifically, like I tend to measure myself as you're doing a great job or you're worthy of things based upon how great my business is running. Because I think
Mhm.
it's an easy way of setting metrics to doing that. And I bring all of this up is because what metrics would you suggest if we are of this mindset to measure yourself, or to maybe that's not even the right thing to be doing. So you could tell me to just knock it off altogether.
I love this
Personal
question.
side of stuff, because many of us are like I can see my sales, I can see my profitability, I'm like that's my mindset. And so when I'm at home, like my measurement of how great of a mom I'm being is like, do my kids want to hang out with me? Are they still hanging out with me? Do they still talk to me? I have teenagers coming up here now, so
Yeah,
it's like
I
how.
don't know
And
the answer.
yes, and even with that, like now I'm just comparing myself to business and being a mom, but how do I get centered back into myself and setting those boundaries and those achievable milestones of
Yeah.
feeling worthy yourself, especially as someone that has been through trauma,
Mhm.
abuse, things like that. I think a lot of times, regard it can be different in different situations. I know I've often heard too, and can resonate with this, like if there was a sexual assault or anything like that that had occurred, a lot of times, like there's this big stigma around sex that things are, it's not okay there. Same
Mhm.
thing with, just physical abuse of things, like how does someone kind of, if they're in that measurement mindset, be able to healthy do that for themselves?
So first off, this idea of measurement, I understand. I think for me, it was always up. I had an issue with measurement simply because it led me to think that I had to have expectations. And I think expectations are
Mm,
dangerous. They're real slippery slope. So in my mind, in my experience, expectations are always going to leave us feeling less than. And,
mhm.
not everything is as solid as metrics. Yes, when we go to work, absolutely, right? We have metrics. It's kind of easy. We know what to expect. And sometimes it's hard because maybe we fall short, but we learn. Well, in life, there isn't any clear-cut metric, just like there's no clear-cut book on how to be a perfect parent. And, many of us as moms struggle in that space. Do my kids want to hang out with me, like you said, and feeling like, was I too hard on them with, whatever topic of discussion that could lead to, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
understanding that when we reconnect to that space of wholeness with us, it's more about, because it's more about connecting with what feels right for us, what feels safe and what feels good. So I want to give you an example here. We talk a little bit about motherhood and then with, balancing work, and balance is always relative to where we are in life. We can't expect the flow to just be like this. There are times that it's going, and for the listeners that can't see me, I'm doing like a wave with my hands, but there are times where it's going to feel up and down, and we're going to feel like we're not hitting our metrics, because guess what? The sooner we can accept this, that's life. The sooner we can accept that, the better, because then those metrics become flexible. And I love
Mm-hmm.
the word flexibility. And I love the idea of coming within ourselves. So I'm going to go back to that example of motherhood. And I know this because I have my moments in motherhood where I struggle. I have 4-year-old twins and an almost 13-year-old, and they're all boys. And I often joke that I could be a UFC ref because it's crazy in this house.
I understand.
It is absolutely bonkers. But I notice on the days where I feel like I'm falling short of that metric as a mother, instead of choosing to literally look at that metric and decide, I am, at 70%, or maybe I'm at a 60% mothering day and I am just doing horrible and I'm feeling, and I go into that snowball of negativity. That's
Mm-hmm.
not going to help me be a better mother. That's not going to connect me to my wholeness, because my wholeness is the space inside of me that tells me that all those things are possible, that I'm possible of being great, that I already am a great mother, that I already am loving, and that I already am, they chose me before they came here. And so when we connect to that space, we can say, okay, today's been a rough day. We can acknowledge that. We're not fake. We're not fake. We're real. It's been a shitty day,
Mm-hmm.
right? I've had a shitty
Yeah.
day. And what I like to do, and what I invite everybody to try out, is, what's one thing I can do that will make me feel like a good mom today? I'm just going to take one thing. And if that means, going and apologizing to my children for being angry and letting them know that, I maybe need a timeout for myself. I've done that before. I've put myself in timeout.
Oh, me
Or
too.
amen to that. Or going and, sitting with them and spending, 10, even just 10 minutes. If all I have is 5 minutes, okay, 5. And then I walk away knowing that I did something. And I don't worry so much about that 60% anymore, because I did something that reconnected with that space of that wholeness. Because in that wholeness, we're 100% capable. We're 100% worthy. And it's similar
Mm-hmm.
when we look at, then the other, when we're balancing work with it. We're not always going to be 100% work, 100% mom. It's going to fluctuate. That's just not possible. And again, the sooner we
No.
accept that, the better our lives are going to be. So then when it
Yes.
comes to work, understanding, okay, what are my goals, and realigning to those goals, and, being able to pick those priorities basically, and sticking with
Mm-hmm.
those priorities. And, sometimes it even means making ourselves do some of the things that we've been putting off. And again, not playing that comparison game, not playing that expectation game, because sometimes we're just not there yet. And we talk about
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that in coaching, that power of yet, and giving ourselves grace and the ability to be human, to fall short, to learn, and to do better next time, because failure isn't an end result. It's that platform that takes us above and beyond, however we choose to make and what we choose to make of it.
Sure. And I think we all have like shitty moments and failure points during our day, but it's an occurrence, Even with
One
that, like
thing,
you can decide to rather say like today sucked, or a part of today sucked, That's something
Mhm.
that I've really been trying really hard to focus on, because I would have something happen at work or something happen with the kids, and then I would instantly chalk it up in my mind as like today was a shitty day, I need a
Oh,
glass of wine or 4, whatever. And then you're like, okay, that was a crappy moment, but
Mhm.
recenter, go back
Yeah.
about your day instead of, and that's something that we've really been talking to our kids a lot about too, because sometimes even when they would come home from school, they're like, I had a terrible day. How come? Well, did that make your whole day terrible, or was that just a terrible event? And even if I don't care if they even answer me, but just thinking about those things, that can go the same for your team too. I had a team member that came in yesterday. God, it's so hot outside, which I totally empathize with them because Arizona
Yeah.
is just hot as hell.
Hmm.
And you're like, I totally understand. And then this happened at this job, and I'm like, but did that constitute a crappy day, or was that just a crappy job? And he's like,
I love it.
well, it was just a crappy job. And I'm like,
Hmm.
and even if they don't say another word after that, you're instilling that into those things. So those are things where, as team leaders, if you're a business owner, a mom, anybody, or influential even around your friends, because it seems like in today's world, like, that's just kind of what it is. People,
Right.
do you find that too when you're in your coaching practice? I listened to Brendan Burchard a lot too, and he was talking about how people live in their childhood for too long. It's like a
Mm.
story that they tell themselves. And yeah, some shitty things can happen in your childhood, but that doesn't mean that the rest of your life has to suffer because of that. And I love so much of what you're saying. Like, you give that 22-year-old girl a hug and you tell her
Absolutely.
that you have her. That's been one of the best coping mechanisms for me ever, is identifying that point where that's really kind of a trigger for you, and then going back to that person and
Yeah.
talking. Like, I will talk to that little 8-year-old girl as if she's just right next to me. And I think
Yeah.
that's a really cool thing to do, and to be able to talk about this stuff. I really appreciate you being so candid and open with those things too. I think it's so incredibly helpful. So I
Thank
want to kind of shift just a little bit with some things, because I was reading through your website, which, if you guys have not, I will link it in the show notes. It's beautifully put together on there.
thank you.
But there was a great little spot in there that you had said that, I believe at some point we need to stop waiting for things to get easier, waiting for people to change. Instead, we
Hmm.
must create the change within. What did you mean by that? And how can people kind of get into that mindset? Because I think that's beautiful.
Absolutely. So this kind of goes back to that whole expectation things. So of things, excuse me. So many of us, we look out in the world, and even with what you were just sharing with, it was a hot day today, and so now this is ruined, and we're, what are we going to wait for the weather to change to have a better day? Are we going to wait,
Mhm.
for, we know this customer is a jerk 9 times out of 10 when we go say drop off at their facility. Are we going to wait till they decide to have a good day to feel valued within, or that our day is worthy of being good? No. So my
Mhm.
point with saying that is simply that you know being able to understand that if we're waiting for others to change, so if we're waiting for someone to show us that they love us back, if we're waiting for a family member to stop disrespecting us, or if we're waiting for our boss to start recognizing us and give us that promotion, one, we're going to be disappointed, and we're going to be waiting for a long time, and we're going to have a lot of resentment inside. And um, again, that those we have to recognize, what stories are we telling ourselves that we're allowing us to be in this place, or that we're allowing ourselves to either be in resentment, anger, complacency. That's a big one. Or even fear is obviously a
Mhm.
humongous one. Fear is the killer of dreams and transformations in our lives. And so what I mean by going within and create that change within is, if we're in a place where we recognize that, oh, I have been waiting for such and such to change, or I have been waiting for the opportunity to get recognized at our job, kind of asking ourselves, what can we do, and discovering what that looks like inside for us. Are we still aligned with this employment? Are we still aligned in this relationship? Are our wants and our desires still finding that same place of purpose? And
Mhm.
when we begin to take a deep look into those things, we begin to create those little shifts and ripple effects within us that then expand outward. And when we begin to do that, it might not be big at first if we start small, but it is those moments that are so pivotal that create these massive shifts in our lives for beautiful and profound transformation. And I love seeing this happen in my clients' lives when they realize that they can take their power back by going within and just getting curious about who they are and becoming that like
Hmm.
observer of their experience, their human experience, their bodily experience, their connection with their understanding of higher power. I mean, it's just such a beautiful place when we decide to put ourselves in charge of making the change that we want to see.
Yes, so good. I think truly this is why personal development is so incredibly important, whether everybody needs it. Everyone, because it's like we learn how to treat others, we learn how to do this, we learn how to do this, and it's literally for the to meet the expectations of others. But
Hmm.
rarely are we ever taught, or is it emphasized on how to do that for ourselves. And
Yes.
I think
Mm,
truly
abs-
when you trade expectations in for appreciation,
Absolutely.
it makes a massive difference. Because I think honestly, like the grumpiest old bastards ever, or like these dudes, I work with a lot of dudes. This is why I say that. Because they like the grumpy ass old men that I work with, like they will they have such high expectations, or like their way or the highway. Like that's just kind
Hmm.
of like our industry thing. It's like the good old boys culture of it's been done this way forever, you know? But their expectation level is so
Yes.
outdated that they're just miserable all the time. Not on my team, but other teams. They're like so miserable because those expectations are not being met. So I would challenge anybody that's listening to this that that's kind of a trigger for them. Like they're thinking like, yeah, I do kind of have like really high expectations. I have
Yeah.
to personally watch this with my spouse too, because we work
Yes.
together in my business too. And so a lot of times I'll be like, well, this is what my expectation is with getting things with work done. And then I come home and I carry those expectations into my marriage. And it's a
Right.
very, very difficult thing to work through, but it's that personal development that you can, like, you can find it anywhere now.
Absolutely.
But it's like, learning to catch those things because we're not going to be perfect in these things that we are discussing today. We're going to suck at this shit someday just because we've got a bad mindset ourselves. But
Mhm.
being cognizant to catching when we're doing those things so that we can flip the script. And sometimes you won't still, but that's where you learn a good lesson, you know, is just so incredibly important because we have to learn to fill our own cup. Is that something kind of what you talk
We.
about instead of waiting for someone else? Like when you talk about waiting, you know, the Dr. Seuss book, like the journey thing, I can't remember, like, the places we
Places
will
we
go.
go.
My
Mhm.
favorite part of that whole book, every time my kids love that book, we've read it hundreds of times, but when it talks about the waiting place, like people are always sitting at this waiting place, like, well, when he loves me, or when I get the promotion, just like you talked
Or
about, when she
when
does this,
I
when
lose
my
the
kids
weight.
do this. Yes. Like there's a bajillion different reasons why people are just sitting and waiting. But
Mhm.
you're wasting while you're waiting. That is something like I think of so much when I find myself waiting for somebody to do something. I'm like, I'm wasting time waiting for someone. So was my communication not clear, or do I have too high of expectations? Because typically those are the two reasons why people have you waiting somewhere. So I think like really just to kind of tie all of that together, like those are just some things like I would love to add on top of what you just said, because I
Yeah.
think so many women struggle with these things, you know, because we are taught to meet others' expectations. So it's a real bitch to try to get rid of your own.
It is. And you know what? I think too, one, I love the phrase wasting while you're waiting. I think you should do something with that because that's very clever. And I think, it hits a lot of people, kind of, it's that like that truth slap, right? Of just like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, when people get so triggered when we say, what are your excuses? And it's like, I don't have excuses. You know what? We all do. Let's be real. We all do. And,
Yep.
and are we wasting while we're waiting? And I also love this idea and what you share because you have such good self-awareness, Tanya, and obviously that is part of why you do what you do here on the podcast and out in your life, because you have this self-awareness, you have that ability to self-check yourself. Whereas typically, some of those people that you spoke about that have these high expectations, or they put pressure on people, or they think that, being angry and mean gets them what they want, or their ego or whatever, they don't have that
Hmm.
self-check. So a lot of, this discussion is also around how capable and aware, or how capable are you of allowing yourself to step into self-awareness, that place of observing, not only your thoughts, your actions, but how you're speaking in the world and how you're showing up, and being able to actually check yourself. Like you said, nobody is perfect. And we're actually doing ourselves such a disservice by just, saying that we're trying to strive for perfection, because then we're not trying to grow. We want to
Right.
leave that room that we're not perfect, and there's going to be opportunities for growth. And where can we have that self-awareness to look at ourselves and say, like you said, are my expectations too high? Am I wasting while I'm waiting? Where are my excuses? And gently and lovingly and safely, if we have to, with somebody else, and support in support with them, bring those into the light so that we can take the shame, take the anger, because there's no such thing as bad emotions. We like to label things as good and bad. And I think that everything has a purpose and a lesson for us. And if we can see it that way, we can bring it into the light with love, and we can transmute it.
Yes. Oh, beautifully said. Beautifully said. So as we kind of wrap up here with some stuff, I could sit and talk to you forever about this stuff. So there's just so many things and different facets and different lanes you can go down this stuff. So I'm sure we can do a whole nother one of these. But kind of as we wrap up, just some kind of final words of wisdom, or maybe some advice that you'd like to share with the listeners that are kind of seeking personal growth or transformation in their own lives, and why you believe everybody should have a coach.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, okay, what do I want to hit on first? First things first, why should everybody have a coach? Why have I even in my business and recently taken on a coach of my own? Because life and why we're here is for growth and learning. And what I love about coaching is it's done in the now and the how. And that experience is really powerful, because yes, while I can look back and see some of the reasons why I have these limiting beliefs that I gained, or the mindset that I gained way back when, I can work in the how, and I can work on moving forward in the things and the places that I need to now. And that's why coaching is so great. It's great to have that shift in that perspective. Again, I'm going to go back to my business name, SoulVibes, to have those soul fulfilling connections, or those badass connections. I mean, it doesn't have to be me, that's what, self-healing and self-development, is not a one size fits all. It's, you find your cup of tea, right? You find that person, you interview people, and you find your flavor, and you go with it. And, there's just so much divine timing. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is making so much sense, go find your person. Coaching is for everybody. It's very powerful, very transformative. And, I just truly, truly believe in it, and I love it. And I'm so happy that I've had such good mentors in this field. Now, as far as something that I would like to share with everybody, or that I'd like to invite everybody to consider doing, there's so many good things. First thing, just because it's close to my heart, learn how to root for yourself, learn how to cheer for you. Because again, this goes with that expectation. A lot of us are waiting for somebody to tell us good job, or somebody to say, go for that job opportunity, go, go and be a stay-at-home mom, or yes, you should be a stay-at-home mom. Yes, you should take that career opportunity. Yes, you should leave that relationship. We need to be able to learn to cheer for ourselves and say, you got this. I'm going to tell you right now, before I got on this podcast, I looked in the mirror and I told myself everything that I knew I wanted and I needed to hear. I've learned to give that to myself, not from a place of conceit or ego, but from a space of that wholeness that I talk about, that love, and that, where we talk about, I got you. I got you, and I'm going to protect you. These moments are coming at each and every one of you every day. What are you going to do with them? I'll tell you what, if you're rooting for yourself, you're going to shine. And I want you to consider adopting the phrase, yes, me. And I have goosebumps right now, because I believe I believe in it so deeply. Yes, me. Because right now, in this day and age of social media, we're seeing people's lives, their bodies, their successes, their travels, their kids, and everything. For the most part, some people are very candid, but it looks so magical and amazing. And we're comparing, and we're playing that enoughness game. And when we say, why not me? Why didn't that happen to me? And why isn't this working out? We are using it in a disempowering way. So I encourage adopting the phrase, yes, me, because yes, I see you, girlfriend, or I see you, getting your job promotion. And yes to me, because I know the truth of that. There is enough success, love, and abundance in this world for each and every one of us. So yes, me. There you have it.
So I also have goosebumps all over my body now. So I'm not listening to you. I've made more post-it notes over here than it's going to take me a while to put these together. I love so much having conversations like this because first of all, just a little backstory here. I was watching this Taylor Swift documentary on Netflix. And at the end, have you seen that?
I haven't, but you know what? I love her, so I need to watch it.
I didn't know that much really about her. Like to me, she was like when she came out in country music, and I haven't really followed her since then. But that documentary, it was so great to watch with my daughter, first of all, because just watching the way that her confidence developed as she got older was a really cool thing to just chat about as it was happening. And I could see things happening with that. But at the end of the show, she's sitting in the house and she's kind of talking about how she got into like politics in Tennessee and like she was really rooting to get this one woman, it's a woman, you're supposed to support her, but she did not support the things that Taylor believed in, and she spoke up about that. And I thought it was so incredibly awesome. At the end of the show, she's sitting there and she's like kind of giving her little soapbox moment. And it was badass what she was saying. Like she was just like really convicted with what she was saying. And then at the end of it, she's like, oh, I'm sorry. I was kind of on my soapbox there for a moment. And then she's like, nope, I don't do that anymore. She's like, I don't apologize for speaking my truth in my house as loud as I want to with the house I purchased with the music that I wrote from the stories I have lived. And it was so cool to watch her say that out loud and catch herself.
Yes.
And be very vulnerable with that in saying, essentially, yes, me, like catching yourself and saying out loud, we don't do that anymore. And she does that a few times in that documentary. She's like, nope, we don't do that anymore. And she'll start talking on the positive mention of what it was she was talking about. But just getting, and I work so much with this with my daughters too, of saying like, stop apologizing for everything. Look in the mirror and be super fucking confident and say, yes, me, and not think for 2 seconds. Like, make that, I'm not trying to be conceited. Just remove that shit and that language from your brain because many of, yes, how many men do you see walking around that just think they are king shit? they never apologize for being confident, but for somewhere women are ingrained to think that they have to apologize for one, cheering for themselves, believing in themselves, thinking that they're worthy, for showing up for themselves or taking time for themselves. And we have to change that narrative. And a beautiful part of that is what you just suggested is, yes, me. It's something so simple. Like write that on your mirror in your bathroom. So every time you go somewhere, you see that.
Yes.
Like cheer for yourself. It is so cool. Something that a good friend of mine, Jess, had recommended is she's like, so many women have such a hard time understanding, or being able to speak their truth as to what their accomplishments in life have been. Because we downplay everything. We play a little bit smaller. We don't want to seem like we're conceited or something. She's like, so my big challenge, a business coach had told her, have 3 people that are on your team, write a small bio about you and mention your accomplishments and then smash those together. And she's like, I have it posted where I can read it every morning. So that just being able to look at it and see, because sometimes we kind of subconsciously put that stuff away, that she can visually see it every day, and being able to visually see it. And even another step of reading it out loud to yourself, you're audibly hearing these things. She's like, that has been such an incredible confidence builder for me because I'm able to see what I have done, because many of us tend to pick ourselves apart for the shit that we haven't got completed. Although you were like super awesome all day long today. So that yes, me is very, very powerful. You need
Thank
to just
you.
make t-shirts and sell
Yes,
those with your
right?
coaching.
That's a good idea. I didn't think of that.
That
And
could be
it's
your swag.
swag. I know, and it's funny because I was thinking I need to do some Soul Vibe Tribe, but maybe I need to change that up and, yes, me it.
Do put that Soul Vibe Tribe on there and put a big old yes me on there. That would be so cool. So awesome.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
no, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to agree with you too. You talk about like putting that up on the mirror, and I often say affirmations are kind of, they're like music. I love music, and music, makes me want to shake and dance. And
Mhm.
music is great in the background, but guess what's better if you're dancing to it? So affirmations, like you need to align with the ones that, make you want to dance and flow, that match that flow of your life, and then put the
Mhm.
action steps into it and choose to, make that dance and take the actions that align with those, that beautiful music and flow of your affirmation. So I love that because you're talking about reading things out loud and in front of the mirror. And we just really need to learn to love ourselves and speak to ourselves as if, we're our own best friend, we're our little sister, our aunt, our mom, and just bring so much wholeness and love in that space. So I just really resonated with everything you shared right there.
Sure. Well, that I'm glad. I'm glad because that just speaks to the fact that people need to hear that, you know? Have
Yeah.
you read Mel Robbins' book, The High Five Habit?
I haven't. I do listen to her podcast. I love Mel Robbins, big
Mhm.
fan. I think she's so fun. I think we'd be good friends.
Yeah.
But
I love she's
I,
just so vulnerable and so raw about being kind of like just shit sometimes. And I love that, but that was what that book's about. Like her challenge is every time you go in front of a mirror, high five yourself.
yes,
And she's
yes.
like, it's so weird forever. And I was like, I'm gonna do this. Cause when she launched her book, she did that. And like for 2 days, like I remember doing that in the bathroom at my office at my septic company. I was like, it's so weird. I hope nobody heard me do that.
You want
But
to something funny?
it's like tying the dancing into it. There's a physicality part of it. Tony Robbins trainings does the same thing. Like there's a lot of physical activity in it. Like you do one of his things, like you will physically be sore by the end of it. I remember my husband, the first one he did, he's like, this is weird stuff. I'm like, but it there's something between that physical movement, whether it's a high five, it's
Yes.
a booty shake,
Mind
whatever you
body
got going on.
connection. That
Yes.
mind body
Like,
connection. Yeah, we
hmm
need to do that. And it's funny because my son yesterday, I was talking to my husband. He goes, "Mommy, are you talking to yourself again?" And I'm like, no, I'm not talking to myself in the mirror, pumping myself up. Nope, nope, we're good. I'm actually having a conversation with a real human.
yeah.
So
I
yes,
think
it
my
does
kids
feel
do
weird
that
at
when they're
first.
all mad at themselves and they're like, my son can get a little down on himself sometimes. I'm like, don't make me have to make you have to stand in front of the mirror. And then he starts laughing because he knows exactly what I'm talking about. Because it is such a beautiful thing for people to be able to see that. And it's not, and as moms, just such a beautiful thing to be able to share that even with our kids with stuff, like
Of
teaching
course.
them to cheer for themselves instead
Mhm.
of the outside validation. Because, God, do they have some. I don't envy them growing up in the social media and internet world that we didn't necessarily have to do so
Right.
much of, but it's just like it's constant comparison and validation. So, really teaching them to be able to cheer for themselves is such a huge thing, too. So, I think it's cool that they hear us talking out loud to ourselves all the time.
I love it. I do. I love hearing that you do that as a mom. It's so important for us to be able to give our children those examples. So super, super
Sure.
powerful.
More is caught than taught. I truly believe that. So I
Yeah.
think really them watching us do a lot of things is so important. So if somebody wants to work with you, Kristie, where do they find you and what do you have going on?
Absolutely. So, of course, my website is a great way to get in contact with me. And I think you're going to post that, so I don't have to share
Yeah.
the name
Yep.
or the link. Excuse me. And then, on Instagram, I'm kind of a noob when it comes to this whole social media stuff. So I have a few
Mhm.
posts on there. I'm really trying to dive in. I love writing and sharing, kind of artsy stuff. So I'm working in that and also trying to give some of those little nuggets of wisdom. I have to post yes me now. And so
Yes.
Instagram, I will eventually keep her out on YouTube because I do plan on posting some of my meditations on there. And I did give you a complimentary e-workbook. And this is actually jam freaking packed with stuff. This isn't just like something that I was like, oh, let me slap this together and throw it out there. Like, no, this is if you're looking to reconnect with gratitude or just deepen your experience, this is a great way. And, 21 days is kind of on that minimum side that it takes to create a habit. So hopefully you get to just keep and continue practicing. But for the sake of like 21 days, when we get down to it, is actually quite long. 21 days of journaling. It has 2 complimentary meditations. It has 3 sound clips to really personalize experience and a visualization. And I put a lot of time and effort creating in these things and trying to make them just feel special and, heartfelt. So I'm excited for you all to check that out. And in doing so, you can potentially be invited to any of the future workshops that I host, or if you're looking to work with me, I also work with small businesses to do, workshops, lunch and learns. I recently did one that went so well. And, I just really am very passionate about speaking to others and looking what their goals are and creating and crafting an experience that is unique and just amazing and powerful for them.
That is so awesome. You need to put a retreat together.
Oh my gosh, I have been wanting to do that. I can't tell you, even when I do my workshops, and I'm happy that we're talking about this, I need to find a space. I need to find a space for a retreat. I need to find a space for my workshop. So we need to talk about this. Let's do it.
Yes, I need to find one too. We can help each other
I
out
thought you
there.
said I like you knew of one. Sorry. I'm like, yes, then if you do, I need to hear about this. I would love
We'll find one.
Yes, I need to find one. I want to put together a retreat. So I would definitely be there we go. I'm going to manifest this right now with you all. I'm going to just put together some amazing retreat for everyone. So let's do it.
That would be incredible. That would be incredible. I will definitely be there.
Yes.
So in the end of the podcast, thank you so much for, first of all, for sharing your story, sharing everything, having this conversation with me today. This has personally helped me so much. This is definitely one that is like a listen to again and again. I think that you'll get different things out of it depending upon what mindset you're in that day. So I think it's really awesome. It can be a help. It can be a cheer. It can be a lot of things. So thank you so much for being so authentic and bold and real with us. The term ladies kicking ass to me is a life motto. And it's one of those things where it's not just, I have to be fully going 110% every single day kicking ass. Some days I only got 10% to give. And at the end of the day, I kicked ass today. Sometimes I'm kicking ass at being a mom. Sometimes I'm kicking ass at work. Sometimes I'm kicking ass with myself, or with my husband or things like that. It doesn't all have to be all together. Here our slogan is kind of like balance is bullshit. It's more of like a juggle all the time because people balance want it to look like this, and that's really unachievable. So I think ladies kicking ass is just an incredible power slogan for women to live their lives by. So I love to ask all of my guests the question, what does that phrase ladies kicking ass mean to you in your life?
Absolutely. For me, ladies kicking ass is, am I doing what I set out to do? Because I'm such a person who's connected with my heart. And of course, that place of wholeness that I ask myself, am I connected? Am I showing up every day as that thing that, brings those wrinkles to my eyes because I'm smiling so big? And granted, I don't have to be smiling big every day. It can be a crappy day, but as long as I know that I am connected and aligned with that purpose, that whatever the ebb and flow of balance is, I'm going to ride those waves better and easier because I am focused, I am aligned, I got my mindset right, I got the tools, and I allow myself to have shitty days because I'm human. I allow myself to know that I can have a message and share it, even if sometimes I feel like I'm a mess inside too. That's okay because I'm human. And that to me is kicking ass, is accepting all aspects of myself, my quirks, the places that I struggle, the challenges, and the places that I just frankly kick ass.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that you encompassed everything in there too, because it is so incredibly important that we love all the sides of us, the messy sides, the good sides, the ugly sides. That's what makes up who we are, makes us so freaking awesome.
Absolutely. I agree. All the sides.
Thank you so much, Kristie.
Thank you, Tanya.